Welcome to the dark side of true stories, where every whisper hides a secret and every silence has a scream. Subscribe now because here, the fear is real, and you never know who's listening. The wind howled through the trees, biting at my skin as I trudged through the thick, frozen forest. It was late November, and the snow had already started to settle, a thick blanket of white that covered the earth like a tomb. I had been hiking for hours, the sun long gone behind the mountains, leaving only the eerie glow of a waxing moon to guide me. I should have known better than to wander so far off the beaten path. The woods in northern Ontario were no place for anyone without a deep respect for the dangers they held. Stories about the Wendigo, a creature of legend, had always circulated through the local towns, but I had always written them off as mere superstition. After all, I was a seasoned outdoorsman. The forest was my second home. What could go wrong? But something in the air that night felt different, thicker, heavier, like the very forest was holding its breath. I paused, trying to shake off the creeping feeling that had been inching up my spine for the last hour. The crunch of my boots in the snow seemed too loud, as though it was drawing something closer. The thought made me quicken my pace, but I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that I was being watched. I had heard the stories, of course. The Wendigo, a creature born of cold, hunger, and darkness. A spirit, a monster, some said, cursed to wander the wilderness, forever hungry, feeding on the souls of the lost and the desperate. I didn't believe it, not really, but even so, I couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion that something wasn't right. There were whispers in town about strange sounds in the woods, about hunters who'd gone missing, about the terrifying figure that had been spotted in the distance, tall, gaunt, with a skeletal face and eyes that gleamed like ice. People spoke of the Wendigo in hushed tones, warning travelers to stay close to the roads, to never venture too far into the wilderness alone. I thought it was all nonsense, until now. I stopped at the edge of a small clearing, trying to catch my breath and take stock of my surroundings. The wind had died down for a moment, and I took the opportunity to pull out my map and check my bearings. The dense trees seemed to go on forever, an endless expanse of white and black, the moonlight casting long, haunting shadows. There was something in the stillness of it all that made the hair on my neck stand up, and then I heard it, a low, guttural growl like the sound of something scraping against the earth. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned, scanning the trees behind me. I couldn't see anything, but I felt that something was there, just out of sight, lurking in the dark. I took a step backward, my pulse racing, and that's when I saw it. At the edge of the clearing, barely visible in the moonlight, a figure stood. It was tall, far too tall and thin, its limbs stretched unnaturally long. Its face was a sickening mixture of human and something else, something wrong. The skin was pulled tight over bone, and the eyes, God, the eyes were the worst. They were dark, void-like, and they seemed to pierce right through me, locking onto my every movement. The thing didn't move at first, just stood there, watching. Its breath was ragged, as though it was starving, and the air around it seemed to shimmer with an icy chill that made my breath catch in my throat. The legend spoke of the Wendigo's insatiable hunger, of its need to consume, and I suddenly understood. I wasn't just being watched, I was being hunted. Panic surged through me, and I took off running, my feet slipping in the snow, my heart hammering in my chest. The trees blurred around me as I pushed myself harder, faster, desperate to get away from whatever that thing was. But no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't escape the feeling of its presence, like it was always just behind me, waiting to pounce. I stumbled into a thicket of trees, trying to lose it, but the sound of something moving through the woods, too quick, too close, told me I wasn't alone. I spun around, expecting to see the creature looming behind me, but all I saw were shadows. Then, the growl came again, closer this time, a deep, unsettling noise that seemed to vibrate through my bones. I couldn't breathe. My legs were heavy, my lungs burning as I continued to push myself through the snow. It was only when I heard the snap of a branch underfoot that I realized I had been running in the wrong direction. I was lost. Completely and utterly lost. I stopped, gasping for air, and tried to calm myself. The cold was biting into my skin, the silence of the forest broken only by the pounding of my heart. I had to think. I had to get a grip on myself. But then I saw it again. A flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. The thing was closer, now much closer. I couldn't make out all the details, but the silhouette was unmistakable. It was like a nightmare made flesh, its twisted limbs moving in a way that defied human anatomy. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. My body was frozen, caught between fight and flight, and I didn't know which to choose. That's when I heard the voice. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense. There were no words, no sound, just a presence that seemed to echo inside my mind. It wasn't speaking to me, exactly, but it was communicating something dark, something ancient. Come closer. I'm hungry. The words seemed to wrap around me like chains, pulling me toward the creature. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, trapped in its gaze, the cold air pressing against me like a suffocating weight. And then it moved. Its long, bony fingers reached out, too fast, too close. My body screamed in protest, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, my legs like stone, my breath shallow and quick. The creature was upon me now, its cold breath on my face, its eyes locked with mine. I saw the hunger in them, a primal, animalistic hunger that had nothing to do with food, nothing to do with anything I understood. I was its prey. Just as it was about to strike, a sudden noisy crack of twigs breaking cut through the air. The creature froze, its head snapping toward the sound. For a moment I thought it had lost interest in me, but then it turned back, its eyes narrowing. I didn't wait to see what happened next. With all the strength I had left, I tore myself from the grip of fear and ran. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. I ran until my legs gave out, until I collapsed in the snow, my body shaking with cold and fear. The creature was gone when I opened my eyes, but I could feel it, lurking just beyond the trees, watching. It wasn't over. I woke up in my cabin the next morning, my body aching, my mind a blur of half-remembered horror. I thought it had all been a nightmare, the stuff of legend. But the tracks in the snow outside my door told a different story. They were long, thin, and far too large to belong to anything natural. I never went back into those woods. The Wendigo had found me once, and I knew it would be waiting when I returned. It was a quiet, ordinary night when the first sign came. I had been driving back from the city, a long stretch of highway winding through the northern Ontario wilderness. The headlights of my old truck cut through the dark, illuminating the snow-covered road as I cruised past the frozen trees. I had been working as a forest ranger for years, living in the small, remote town of Grey Lake, so I was no stranger to these woods. But this felt different. The wind howled through the trees, making the branches sway like skeletal hands. The air was frigid, biting through every layer of clothing I wore. I turned up the heat in the truck, hoping the warmth would push the unease that had settled into my chest. It was nothing, I told myself, just the solitude of the wilderness, nothing to fear. But then I saw it. At first, it was just a flicker of movement in the trees on the side of the road, something too fast to fully register. I slowed the truck, scanning the trees through the window, but saw nothing. A few moments passed before it came again, this time, clearer. A figure, impossibly tall, moving with an unnatural fluidity between the trees. My heart skipped a beat, and I slammed the brake, the tires screeching as I came to a stop. I knew the stories, of course. The ones people whispered about around campfires and in darkened bars. The Wendigo, an ancient spirit, a creature of hunger and cold, said to haunt these very woods. It had been a long time since anyone had dared speak of it openly, but growing up in Grey Lake, you couldn't escape the tales. Every hunter, every traveler, had their own version. A twisted figure, gaunt and starved, driven by an unquenchable thirst for human flesh. It was a warning, a myth, I had always believed, until now. I could see it more clearly now, tall, impossibly thin, its body stretched unnaturally, as if it had been pulled out of shape by some cruel force. Its skin was pale, stretched tight over bone, and its eyes, those eyes were the worst part. They were dark and empty, no whites, just black pits that reflected the faint moonlight. I had no idea how it was standing, how its legs could support such a spindly frame, but there it was, standing motionless in the trees, staring at me. I don't know how long we stared at each other, but in that moment, I felt something primal stir inside me. It wasn't fear, not at first. It was the recognition of something ancient, something terrifying that had no place in the world I knew. Then it moved. It didn't walk, it glided unnaturally fast, its limbs stretching too far with every step. Its body twisted and jerked in a way that was both animalistic and human, like a marionette whose strings were pulled by something beyond understanding. The thing was coming toward my truck, its gaze fixed on me. The hunger in its eyes was unmistakable. I slammed the truck into reverse, my hands trembling as I fought to keep my foot steady on the pedal. The engine roared in protest, the tires sliding in the snow. But I finally managed to turn the wheel and speed away, heart pounding in my chest. The rearview mirror revealed nothing but darkness, the shape of the trees blending into one another. But it wasn't gone. The thing wasn't just a figment of my imagination. It was real, and it was following me. I drove faster, my truck's headlights piercing the night, but every time I looked in the rear view, the thing was closer. It was running now, moving so quickly that I could see it darting between trees. Its long limbs stretched out like branches in the wind. The hunger it exuded was palpable, as if it could smell me, sense my fear, and it only made it faster, more relentless. I had to make it to town. I knew the road well. I just had to keep going, but I could feel the temperature dropping. The air grew colder with every passing second, colder than the winter night should have been. I could see my breath now, fogging up the windshield. The world outside growing impossibly still, as if time itself had frozen. I glanced to the side, my stomach turning as I saw it for the first time, standing just beyond the truck. It was there, standing next to the road, impossibly tall, its head craning unnaturally to peer inside. It had stopped running, but the air was thick with its presence, like a wall of ice pressing against the glass. I couldn't stop. I couldn't look. I forced my eyes forward, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Suddenly, the truck lurched. Something hit the side of the vehicle, something with the force of a freight train. And I heard the unmistakable sound of something scratching at the metal, dragging along the side like claws on stone. I swerved, heart leaping into my throat, but when I looked to the side, there was nothing there. Just the darkened trees and the oppressive silence of the night. I couldn't take it anymore. I sped up, eyes locked on the road ahead, praying for the lights of town, for the safety of others. But no matter how fast I drove, the thing was always there, lurking just behind me, as if it was bound to the very fabric of the forest itself. It was an entity, a spirit, a hunger that I couldn't escape. When the lights of the town finally came into view, I couldn't help but feel a sliver of relief. I sped through the streets, my mind racing, my heart still pounding, but the creature, whatever it was, didn't follow me. I stopped at the edge of town, my truck shaking in the parking lot of the ranger station, and I looked back. There was nothing. The night was still, the town was safe, but something inside me had shifted. I knew it wasn't over. The Wendigo had been real, and it had found me. The terror I felt was only a prelude to something worse, something that waited patiently, lurking in the forest, waiting for the next lonely soul to wander too far. And I knew, deep down, that it wasn't the last time I'd see it. It would be back. The hunger would never be satisfied. The night was cold and silent, a bitter winter chill that seemed to seep into my bones no matter how many layers I wore. I had always loved the quiet of the woods, the stillness that blanketed everything, but tonight the silence felt different. It felt suffocating, as though the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something. I had been working as a forest guide in northern Minnesota for the past 5 years, taking groups on hikes and showing them the beauty of the untouched wilderness. It was my life, and I knew these woods like the back of my hand. But there were things I had only heard about in whispers that haunted these woods. Things that made even the bravest hunters pause before venturing too far. That night, I had set out alone, eager to clear my mind after a long week. I was familiar with the trail, a small, well-worn path that wound through thick pines and over frozen streams. Nothing had ever happened to me before, no strange encounters, no signs of anything that shouldn't be there. At least, that's what I thought. The air felt heavier than usual as I walked deeper into the forest. It wasn't just the cold, it was something more, something I couldn't put my finger on. It was almost as if the trees themselves were watching me, as if they knew something I didn't. I shook it off, telling myself it was just the isolation, the eerie stillness of the night that played tricks on my mind. I stopped at the edge of a clearing to catch my breath, looking out at the moonlight filtering through the trees. The snow was crisp, untouched except for my footprints. That's when I heard the sound of a branch snapping, followed by the unmistakable crunch of something heavy moving through the snow. At first I thought it was just a deer, maybe a moose, but then the sound grew louder, closer, too close, too deliberate. I froze, my heart racing. The forest was never this alive at night. I had learned to trust my instincts in the wild, and right now, every fiber of my being screamed at me to run. But I stood frozen, listening as the sound came closer, only to stop, as if whatever was out there had sensed me, was waiting. My breath caught in my throat, and then I saw it. Out of the shadows, a figure emerged, tall and impossibly thin, its body contorted in a way that was both human and otherworldly. The thing moved with an eerie, unnatural grace, its limbs stretching too far, its steps too long. Its face was gaunt, skeletal, the skin stretched tight over sharp bones. But it was the eyes that I couldn't look away from, deep, dark, like pits of endless blackness, and they were locked on me. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but my body was frozen, rooted to the spot. The creature didn't move at first. It just stood there, staring at me, and then it made a low, deep growl that seemed to come from the depths of its chest. The air around it seemed to freeze, the temperature dropping so suddenly that I could see my breath in sharp, frigid clouds. The Wendigo. The name flashed through my mind, unbidden, but it fit. Everything about this thing screamed Wendigo, terrifying creature of legend, born of the cold, driven by hunger, and cursed to wander the woods, searching for souls to devour. I had always thought it was just a myth, a tale told around campfires to scare kids. But now, standing in front of me, this thing, this creature, was real. A chill ran down my spine as it took a step forward. The ground beneath its feet cracked, the snow crunching under its weight as it approached. Its limbs stretching out, impossibly long. It wasn't walking like a human. It was something more grotesque, a twisted version of a person, moving with the jerky, unnatural movements of a marionette. It stopped a few feet away from me, its breath shallow and ragged. I could hear it, feel it, as if it were inside my skull, echoing through my brain. The hunger was palpable, filling the air with something dark, something that gnawed at my very soul. "Please, leave me alone," I whispered, my voice trembling, but the creature didn't respond. Instead, it tilted its head, its eyes narrowing, as if it was studying me. I felt the darkness press in around me, thick and suffocating, as though I was no longer standing in the forest but in a void where nothing existed but me and this creature. Its presence was overwhelming, and for a moment I thought I would suffocate under the weight of its hunger. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it moved, but not forward. It crouched, its long bony fingers brushing the snow as it leaned in closer, its face inching toward mine. The smell it was rancid, like something dead, like decay itself, and I could feel my stomach lurch. It spoke, but not in words, at least not in any language I knew. It was a growl, a low rumble that vibrated through my chest, followed by something that sounded like a scream, but it was barely audible, a whisper in the wind. I felt the cold seep into my bones, my legs finally giving way, and I collapsed to my knees, unable to move, unable to run. I had heard the stories, the Wendigo, a creature born from the cold and driven by an insatiable hunger, but no one had ever mentioned how its gaze could paralyze you, how its presence could steal the very breath from your lungs. I had never imagined that it would come for me, a simple forest guide, someone who had lived among these woods all my life. I don't know how long I knelt there staring into its dark eyes, waiting for it to strike. I was ready to die, ready for the darkness to claim me, but something strange happened. The Wendigo paused, as if it had heard something. It straightened, its head snapping toward the trees, its eyes narrowing. Then, it was gone. In an instant, it vanished into the shadows, moving faster than I could follow. The forest, once again, was silent. The only sound was my ragged breathing, my heart still racing in my chest. I stayed there, frozen, unable to move, unable to think, until the first light of dawn broke through the trees. When I finally stood, trembling, I knew something had changed inside me. The Wendigo hadn't just stalked me, it had marked me, claimed me in some way. And now, every time I walked these woods, I could feel it, the hunger, the eyes, and I knew, deep down, that it was still out there, watching, waiting. The first time I encountered the Wendigo, I thought it was nothing more than a story. I had spent most of my life living in the small town of Coldwater, a place so far removed from the rest of the world that people forgot it existed. The town was nestled deep within the northern woods of Canada, a patch of land that had been untouched by time. Growing up, I heard all sorts of stories, ghosts, strange creatures, things that went bump in the night, but the one that stuck with me the most was the tale of the Wendigo. The older folks would tell us stories about the creature tall, skeletal, with eyes as black as pitch. They said it roamed the woods, a spirit of hunger forever chasing its prey. It was cursed, they said, a creature born from greed and starvation, forever driven to consume, to feast on the souls of the lost. I dismissed it as folklore, the type of thing people tell children to keep them from wandering too far into the woods. But then I saw it. It started like any other night. I had been out for a walk, clearing my head after a long day at the lumber mill. The moon was full, casting an eerie light over the snow-covered ground, the silence of the forest broken only by the crunch of my boots in the snow. The air was thick with the cold, biting into my skin, even though I wore a thick jacket and woolen gloves. The woods around me were still unnaturally still. I would later come to realize. I didn't think much of it at the time, but there was something about the way the trees bent under the weight of the snow that seemed wrong. The branches were twisted, like they were reaching for something, pulling themselves toward the forest floor. The wind had stopped, leaving only the sound of my own breathing in the air. That's when I heard the rustling sound, the snap of a twig in the distance. I stopped dead in my tracks. At first I thought it was just an animal, maybe a deer or a wolf. But then I heard it again. This time it was louder, closer. Something was moving in the trees, something large. I strained my eyes, trying to see through the darkness. The shadows played tricks on me, and for a moment I thought I saw something tall and thin standing between the trees. I told myself I was just tired. Maybe I'd been out here too long, maybe it was nothing more than the wind. Then I saw it. It wasn't a wolf, it wasn't a deer. It was something else entirely, something that shouldn't have been standing in the woods. The thing was impossibly tall, its body stretched unnaturally thin, like a man who had been starved for decades. Its skin was stretched tight over its bones, pale, almost translucent. It was standing just at the edge of the trees, watching me. Its eyes, those black, hollow eyes, were the worst part. They seemed to gleam in the moonlight, like two pits of darkness. There was no humanity in them, no emotion, just an endless void. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribcage, my breath catching in my throat. I could feel the blood drain from my face as the creature took a slow step toward me. It moved like no living thing I had ever seen. Its limbs were long, too long, and its hands gored. Its hands were like claws, fingers ending in sharp, jagged tips. It didn't make a sound as it moved, just glided toward me with an unnatural grace. It stopped just a few feet away, its breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the thing in front of me, the creature that should have only existed in stories. Then, it spoke. Not with words, not with a voice, but with a presence. I felt it in my chest, in the pit of my stomach, a deep, gnawing hunger, a desire so raw and primal that it nearly suffocated me. The creature's hunger. It was an insatiable need, a hunger that could never be sated, and it was directed at me. Come closer. The voice, or what I can only describe as a thought, reached into my mind, a low whisper that seemed to rattle the very bones in my body. I could hear the wind again, but it was no longer the cold wind of winter. It was something older, something darker. I took a step back, my breath coming in shallow gasps. But the thing didn't move, it only watched, its hollow eyes following my every motion. I turned, my feet finally finding the strength to move. I broke into a run, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in frantic gasps. The snow was deep, and my legs were heavy with fear, but I didn't dare look back. I could feel it, hear it moving behind me, the soft, dragging sound of its feet in the snow. It was following me. I ran for what felt like hours, but when I reached the edge of the woods, it was gone. The silence was absolute. I stumbled out onto the road, my chest heaving, my legs trembling. I looked back one last time, half expecting to see the thing standing in the trees, watching me, but there was nothing. Only the stillness of the forest. I don't remember how I made it home that night, but I know I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it, those eyes, the hunger, the emptiness. The next morning, I tried to shake off the feeling, tell myself it was a dream, that I had imagined it all. But deep down, I knew it was real. I knew I had come face to face with something ancient, something that had no place in the world anymore, something that would never stop hunting. The days went by, but the feeling of being watched never left. Every time I stepped into the woods, I felt its presence. I heard the rustling, the snapping of twigs, the faint growl that echoed in my ears. The Wendigo was out there, waiting, watching. I told the town's elders about what I saw, but none of them were surprised. They simply nodded, as though they had all known it would come for me eventually. They said it was part of the forest, part of the land, a spirit, a curse. And once you saw it, once it marked you, you could never escape. I've tried to move on, tried to leave the woods behind, but the Wendigo is always there, just beyond the edge of the trees, waiting. And I know one thing for sure, no matter how far I run, it will always follow me. It has tasted my fear, and now it's coming for my soul. The night was unnaturally cold, the kind of cold that seemed to cut right through you, no matter how many layers you wore. I was alone, on a solo camping trip in the wilds of northern Michigan, deep in the woods, far from civilization. It was supposed to be a peaceful escape, a few days of solitude to clear my head and reconnect with nature. But instead, what I found was something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. It was a late October evening, just after dusk, when I first heard the noise. At first it was faint, just the crunch of leaves in the distance, maybe the sound of a deer or a bear moving through the forest. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just part of being out here. But as the night wore on, the sound grew more distinct, more deliberate. Something or someone was out there, moving closer. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a hunter or perhaps a lost hiker, but something about the noise felt off. It was too purposeful, too steady, like whatever was out there knew exactly where it was going. I sat in my tent, holding my breath, listening. The wind had picked up, and the trees moaned, their branches creaking under the weight of the cold, but the sound in the distance continued, drawing nearer. I knew the area well, knew these woods like the back of my hand, but tonight it felt different. The silence of the forest was thick and oppressive, and the usual comfort of being surrounded by nature suddenly felt like a trap. I decided to investigate, grabbing my flashlight and stepping outside into the dark. The cold air stung my face as I ventured away from my campfire. The beam of my flashlight swept over the ground, cutting through the dark. I walked slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible, but the rustling sound continued, still growing closer. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. It was as if the forest itself was alive, moving, breathing, watching me. And then, I saw it. At first I thought it was just a shadow, a trick of the light. But as I stepped closer, I saw something taller than any man, standing motionless between the trees. My heart dropped into my stomach as I realized it wasn't human. The figure was too thin, too long, its arms stretched out in unnatural angles. Its skin was pale, sickly, like it had been drained of all life. And its eyes, those eyes were black, blacker than anything I had ever seen. They seemed to draw in all the light around them, like two bottomless pits. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, frozen in place by the thing before me. My breath caught in my throat as it shifted, slowly, its long limbs bending at impossible angles, its head tilting in a grotesque manner, as though it was studying me, savoring the moment. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I stood there, frozen, staring into the void of its gaze. The sound of breathing filled the air, but it wasn't coming from the thing in front of me. It was coming from behind me, from deep within the forest. A deep, ragged sound, like something starving, like something that hadn't eaten in years. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping sharply, until I could see my breath fogging in front of me. The thing in front of me didn't move, but the sound behind me was growing louder, closer. It was getting closer. I snapped out of my stupor, my survival instincts kicking in. I turned and ran, sprinting back to my camp as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear something following me, its steps too quick, too light, closer with every passing second. I felt it, felt the presence of something unnatural behind me, something chasing me, driven by an insatiable hunger. I reached my tent, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the zipper. The thing behind me was still there, its breathing filling the space around me like a drumbeat. I stumbled into the tent, slamming the flap shut behind me and collapsing to the floor. I sat there, panting, trying to control my breathing, my heart still racing. Outside, the forest was silent again, too silent. The air was thick, as if it were holding its breath. I lay on the cold ground, my mind racing. The thing I had seen, what was it? The stories of the Wendigo had always seemed like just that, stories, urban legends passed down through the years. But I knew what I had seen. There was no mistaking it. I had heard the warnings, the whispers from the locals, who told tales of the Wendigo, an ancient malevolent spirit that roamed the northern forests. It was said to be driven by hunger, a creature cursed to wander the woods forever, starving, seeking to devour anything it could find. They said that if you saw it, it marked you for death. I couldn't escape the feeling that it wasn't just a creature of folklore. It was real, and it was hunting me. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time seemed to stretch and bend in that unnatural quiet. I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside the tent made my skin crawl. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that it was waiting for me to slip up, waiting for me to make a mistake. And then, just before dawn, I heard something else. A voice, faint but unmistakable, carried through the silence. It wasn't human, not even close. It was a low, guttural growl, followed by a series of sharp, clicking sounds. My blood ran cold. The Wendigo was out there, right outside my tent, close enough that I could hear its breathing, its whispers. I didn't dare look outside. I didn't move. When the sun finally rose, the creature was gone. The forest seemed to breathe again, the normal sounds of birds and wind returning. But the fear I felt, the cold, gnawing terror, never left me. I packed up my camp quickly, not caring that I had left things behind. I didn't care. All I wanted was to leave. As I drove away, the woods fading behind me in the rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the image of the Wendigo's eyes, those black, empty pits that seemed to swallow the light. I knew it was still out there, somewhere in those woods, waiting, watching, and I knew one thing for certain: it had seen me, it had marked me, it wasn't over, it would never be over. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Every comment adds a new shadow to our haunted corner of the internet. Share this if you know someone who enjoys a good scare. More spine-chilling stories are coming soon, and remember, the scariest stories are the ones that could happen to you. Thanks for watching if you dare.